Have you ever had that one neighbor? The one whose mission in life seems to be making everyone else miserable, nitpicking every little thing, acting like they own the whole street. Maybe they complained about your trash cans, the length of your grass, or the color you painted your mailbox. Well, imagine that neighbor, multiply their obsession by 1,000, and give them a pair of garden shears and a really, really bad idea. That's what happened to me. It all started on a pretty normal Friday afternoon. I remember the exact moment things went sideways. I was sitting in my home office, which is actually a reinforced, climate-controlled shed tucked away in my backyard. Not your typical garden shed, mind you. Inside, a bank of screens glowed, humming quietly. Suddenly, one of those screens flashed bright red. A message popped up, stark and chilling: connection to secure feed lost. Initiating security protocol. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just my Wi-Fi going out. This was the kind of alert I'd prayed I'd never see. Almost simultaneously, a low, deep rumble vibrated through the air. I glanced up, just catching sight of an unmarked gray drone slicing silently across the blue sky overhead. My heart started pounding. What was going on? I quickly pulled up the feed from the security camera pointed at the side of my shed. And there she was. Karen, that's what everyone called her. Just Karen. No last name needed, apparently. She insisted on it, probably because Madame President, as she liked to think of herself, sounded too stuffy, and anything less formal felt beneath her. She was standing there, bold as brass, right beside my shed. In her hand, she held a pair of hefty garden shears. I watched, frozen, as she examined the thick, black fiber optic cable running discreetly along the base of the structure. Then, with a smug little smirk I could see even on the grainy camera feed, she knelt down and snipped it, just like that. One clean cut. She tossed the severed end of the cable into this ridiculous, oversized pink tote bag she always carried, as if she'd just pruned a dead rose bush or tidied up a stray weed. Like she'd done the neighborhood a huge favor. My jaw dropped. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This woman, this nightmare neighbor from the Homeowners Association, had just casually committed a serious federal offense. Jamming a secure military communication line. That's not just breaking an HOA rule about lawn ornaments, that's stepping into espionage territory. And why? Why would she do something so monumentally stupid? Because she thought the cable was ugly. That's it. An eyesore. It clashed with her perfect suburban vision. Let me give you some context. I live in one of those neighborhoods where all the houses look pretty similar, the lawns are neat, and the biggest drama usually involves whose dog barked too late at night. Or at least, it should have been. But our HOA was run by Karen, a woman who seemed to blend the worst parts of a drill sergeant with a fussy interior decorator. She genuinely measured people's grass with a ruler. She sent violation letters typed in Comic Sans font. Seriously, Comic Sans, for things like mailboxes being the wrong shade of black. Once, she tried to fine an elderly couple because their wind chimes were, and I quote, excessively decorative. The woman was a menace in sensible shoes, wielding her clipboard like it was Excalibur. Now, I'm not exactly your typical suburban dad grilling burgers on the weekend. I work from home, but my job isn't selling insurance or designing websites. I'm a contractor. My client, a specific, very sensitive branch of the Department of Defense. Think satellites, encrypted communications, routing signals that are way too important to trust to regular internet lines. My little backyard shed, it housed one of the Pentagon's secondary signal relays. Buried beneath it was a secure room, military-grade shielding, the works. All perfectly legal, permitted, authorized, but definitely not something I wanted Queen Karen poking her nose into. That's why the cable was there. A hardened, dedicated line, carefully encased, routed as discreetly as possible, and marked with clear warning labels in 5 different languages indicating it was critical infrastructure. But Karen, labels, laws, logic, none of that mattered to her. If something offended her sense of suburban aesthetic, it had to go. The week leading up to the snip, Karen had been on a tear about unauthorized wires. She'd roamed the neighborhood, binoculars pressed to her eyes like some kind of budget spy, snapping pictures of anything she deemed out of place. I'd found 3 notices taped to my front door, each accusing me of creating an eyesore with visible equipment. One even included a blurry photo of the cable, a photo she must have taken by practically crawling into the bushes bordering my property line. Classic Karen. I hadn't responded to the notices. What was the point? Arguing with her was like reasoning with a brick wall, only the brick wall would probably type in a more professional font. Besides, I figured she'd eventually get bored and move on to her next obsession, like regulating the color of garden gnomes or the permissible decibel level of birdsong. Big mistake. Huge. So there I was, staring at the red alert screen, the drone humming ominously overhead, the security footage playing Karen's act of vandalism on loop. The silence in my shed was deafening. The secure link wasn't just down, the system registered it as compromised. That single word sent a shiver down my spine. It implied malicious intent, an attack, not just a random failure. I bolted out of the shed, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Had the satellite dish failed? Was it a sophisticated hacker attack? Maybe a particularly ambitious squirrel with a vendetta? Never in a million years did I expect the culprit to be Karen, armed with garden shears and motivated by bad taste. I could actually hear her voice on the security cam audio right before she snipped the line. This will teach him to ignore my notices. Then she just turned and strutted away, like she'd just won some imaginary war only she was fighting. My first reaction, bizarrely, was a hysterical urge to laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all. My second was panic. I checked the emergency relay system. Nothing. No signal, no backup kicking in. That line wasn't just part of my job, it was my job. Cutting it wasn't like unplugging a lamp. It was like ripping the heart monitor off a patient during open heart surgery. And now, the Pentagon, my employers, thought their secure network had been actively compromised by an unknown hostile force. I didn't even have time to process it fully before my pocket buzzed. It wasn't my regular ringtone. It was a specific, encrypted line. I answered, heart hammering against my ribs, and spoke the required code phrase. The voice on the other end was ice cold, clipped, all business. Feed loss confirmed, report status, are you secure? Negative, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. Line was physically severed. Looks like a unintentional breach by a civilian. I have visual confirmation. Understood, the voice replied without a hint of surprise or emotion. Backup team is inbound. ETA 6 minutes. 6 minutes. 6 minutes until my quiet, cookie-cutter cul-de-sac turned into the scene of a major federal incident response. 6 minutes before my life and Karen's got infinitely more complicated. I sprinted towards my driveway, just as my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, cautiously peeked out from behind her lace curtains, probably wondering about the strange drone noise. Then I heard it, the distant but rapidly growing hum of powerful engines. It wasn't the sound of minivans or pickup trucks. This was different, louder, more menacing. Within moments, the first black SUV appeared at the end of the street, then another, and another, followed by a tan-colored Humvee with no license plates and a weird antenna sticking out of the roof. They didn't slow down for the speed bumps. They didn't signal. They just peeled into the cul-de-sac, tires squealing faintly, and pulled straight up onto my front lawn, disgorging serious-looking men and women in tactical gear before the engines even cut off. And right on cue, who should appear strolling around the corner, completely oblivious? Karen. She was holding a large smoothie in one hand and a brightly colored flyer for the upcoming HOA wellness mixer in the other. She stopped dead in her tracks, smoothie halfway to her lips, as 2 stern-faced agents approached her, flashing badges I could see gleaming even from my driveway. "Ma'am, we need you to step aside, please," one of them said politely but firmly. Karen's carefully constructed smile faltered. The flyer slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the ground. I'm the HOA president," she stammered, her voice starting to rise into that familiar indignant tone. "What is going on here? This is highly irregular. I demand to know." "Ma'am," the agent interrupted, his voice hardening slightly. "You need to stand over there now." That's when I stepped forward, flanked almost instantly by two agents who seemed to materialize out of nowhere. I looked directly at Karen, whose eyes were wide with confusion and affront. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice as calm as I possibly could, "remember that cable you were complaining about, the ugly one you cut behind my shed?" Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "The illegal wire, the one cluttering up the neighborhood aesthetics. Yes, what about it?" I took a deep breath and pointed towards the shed, now surrounded by agents setting up equipment. "Yeah, that one. It wasn't just some random wire, Karen. It was part of a classified communications relay, linked directly to the Department of Defense. You didn't just cut a cable, you compromised national security." Karen blinked, once, twice. Then, unbelievably, she laughed, a short, sharp, incredulous bark. "Oh, please, don't be ridiculous. As if anyone would run something that important through a backyard shed in this neighborhood." The agent standing next to me, a woman with eyes that could freeze fire, leaned in slightly towards Karen. Her voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. "Ma'am, you just interfered with a protected federal signal transmission. That constitutes a felony offense, punishable by up to 20 years in prison and substantial fines." I swear, I saw the color drain from Karen's face so fast her spray tan seemed to flake off. Her jaw worked silently, but no sound came out. The reality of the black SUVs, the armed agents, the drone overhead, and the word felony finally seemed to be penetrating her thick skull. Just then, another black SUV pulled up silently. A man in a sharp suit stepped out, holding a sleek tablet. On the screen, I could clearly see the live video feed of a high-ranking military official, someone I recognized sitting at a desk in what was obviously the Pentagon. The man in the suit spoke quietly into an earpiece. "Yes, sir. Civilian interference confirmed visually. Containment protocols initiated. Relay site secure." Karen looked from the man in the suit to me, to the growing squadron of tactical personnel efficiently setting up a secure perimeter around my property, then to the neighbors who were now openly gathering on their lawns, phones out, filming the whole spectacle. Her gaze finally landed back on the severed cable lying near the shed. She whispered, so softly I almost didn't hear it, I just thought it was an ugly cable." And that, folks, was just the beginning. The situation escalated faster than a dropped casserole at a potluck. Karen stood on the edge of my driveway, arms stubbornly folded, as if her sheer force of will could somehow make the federal agents disappear. Her lips were pressed into such a thin line they almost vanished. When one of the agents, Ray's, a no-nonsense woman who looked like she could dismantle a small engine with her bare hands, politely asked her again to step aside for questioning, Karen dug her heels in. "I am the president of this homeowners association," she snapped, puffing herself up. "I demand to know what jurisdiction you think you have here. This is a private community." Agent Reyes didn't even flinch. She simply produced a sleek black folder. Without a word, she opened it, revealing a laminated federal ID card next to an official-looking letter stamped with the Department of Defense seal. Karen stared at it, her eyes blinking rapidly, a little tick starting at the corner of her mouth. "Ma'am," Agent Reyes stated calmly, her voice carrying easily in the sudden quiet, "this property is a licensed civilian infrastructure site supporting secure federal communications under statute." She rattled off a code number. "You have willfully tampered with designated critical equipment. We have full federal jurisdiction and immediate operational authority here. Now please, step aside." Karen sputtered, clearly blindsided. Being told no wasn't in her vocabulary, let alone being told no by people with badges, guns, and the backing of the U.S. government. She tried to pivot, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He's the problem. He never filed the proper community compliance forms for that structure. He's been violating HOA aesthetics policies for months." as if a missing form for shed paint color could possibly override national security protocols. That's when Agent Monroe, a man built like a vending machine with a face that suggested smiling was a forgotten childhood memory, stepped towards her. He spoke slowly, deliberately, each word landing like a heavy stone. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come over here and sit down. We have a few questions for you." Karen, unbelievably, tried one last bluff. "I believe I have legal immunity as an elected community officer." Monroe just raised a single, unimpressed eyebrow and stared at her, repeating even more slowly, "Sit down now." Just as Karen seemed about to argue further, her husband, Dave, emerged from their house. Poor Dave. He always looked perpetually bewildered, like he'd accidentally wandered onto the wrong movie set. He was wearing a bathrobe, mismatched socks, and clutching a mug of what looked like lukewarm coffee. He took one look at the armed agents, the flashing lights, which had discreetly appeared on the SUVs, the mobile command post being set up near my shed and visibly sagged. I don't think Karen had even told him what she'd done. He was about to find out. Within minutes, my backyard looked less like suburbia and more like a forward operating base. Folding tables materialized, laptops clicked open, antennas were erected. A small drone launched silently from a nearby van and hovered watchfully overhead. Karen and Dave were separated, each seated in collapsible chairs, facing different agents asking quiet, pointed questions. Dave looked like a man intensely regretting every single life choice that had led him to this moment. Karen, however, launched into a dramatic performance about how she was merely concerned for neighborhood safety, how the mysterious cable could have been a fire hazard, how she suspected I was running some kind of illegal surveillance operation, and she was just trying to protect the community. The agents listened patiently, occasionally taking notes, their expressions unreadable masks of professional detachment. A few feet away, I was brought over to a temporary terminal where a technician had managed to establish a shaky, rerouted connection. On the screen, the face of the colonel I'd seen earlier stared out, his expression grim. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. Was the breach contained? Any data compromised? I explained what I knew, confirming Karen's act was caught on camera, and the physical line was the only thing damaged. "Good," he grunted. "Local charges will be filed, supported by federal recommendations. We are logging this as a verified sabotage attempt until the investigation determines otherwise." Sabotage. That word hung heavy in the air. I glanced back at Karen, who was now visibly sweating, fanning herself with the discarded HOA flyer despite being in the shade. By now, the neighborhood peanut gallery had grown. The unwritten suburban code of pretending not to notice anything unusual had completely disintegrated. People were out on their lawns, phones held high, whispering excitedly. Karen, the iron-fisted queen of the cul-de-sac, was being questioned by the feds. It was the biggest drama the neighborhood had ever seen, and frankly, people were eating it up. Someone actually brought out lawn chairs. Brenda from Lot 6 even wandered over and discreetly handed me a cold glass of lemonade. She leaned in conspiratorially. "So, what exactly did she cut?" I leaned closer, keeping my voice low. "A live Pentagon communications uplink cable, minor stuff." Brenda's eyes widened like saucers. I think she choked on her gum. Meanwhile, Karen was trying a new tactic. She started listing my supposed transgressions. I was suspicious, had too many electronics delivered, hello Amazon, and had declined to attend the last 4 HOA potlucks, the horror. Apparently in her mind, skipping watery coleslaw and questionable Jell-O molds qualified me as a potential domestic threat. One of the agents, looking bored, asked if she had any actual evidence of wrongdoing on my part. She triumphantly pulled a thick stack of her printed HOA violation notices from that ridiculous pink tote bag. Agent Monroe took them, flipped through the pages with a sigh, and muttered, loud enough for me to hear, "You filed a violation for Halloween lights being too bright." Karen nodded vigorously. They were disturbing the delicate balance of the evening aesthetic. Then came the moment things shifted again. Agent Reyes quietly spoke into her radio, run her name, shared database, flag for any previous incidents, cross-reference known associates. It took less than a minute. A younger agent hunched over a ruggedized laptop looked up. "Got something," he said. "Subject name matches a person of interest flagged in a 2017 complaint. Different community, Oregon. Allegations involved misappropriation of HOA funds, abuse of power, and a minor surveillance violation. Case was never fully pursued, insufficient evidence at the time." My head whipped around. Oregon, misappropriation of funds, surveillance. Karen froze when Agent Reyes relayed the information to her. That was all dropped, she insisted, her voice suddenly high-pitched. "It was a misunderstanding, political rivals trying to smear me." She attempted a shaky laugh. Nobody else laughed. "Did you also think this wire was a political problem, ma'am?" Reyes asked quietly. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again, looking trapped. The commanding agent turned to me. "Do you have any further documentation regarding the subject's behavior? Anything showing patterns of harassment, overreach, or unusual scrutiny?" Oh boy, did I ever. My mind was reeling from the Oregon revelations, embezzlement, surveillance. This wasn't just a case of Karen being a power-tripping nuisance anymore. This was something else entirely, something darker. Agent Reyes looked at me expectantly after asking if I had documentation of Karen's recent behavior. "Oh," I said, snapping back to the present chaos unfolding on my lawn. Yeah, I do." I hurried back to my shed, the agents watching me closely. Inside, away from the prying eyes of the neighbors and the crushing weight of Karen's silent panic, I quickly accessed my local server. For months, purely out of self-preservation, I'd been passively logging anything unusual. Karen peering over my fence at odd hours. Karen timing my arrival and departure from my own house. Karen leaving passive-aggressive notes under my doormat instead of just tapping them to the door. And of course, the infamous grass measuring incident. I downloaded the relevant files onto a secure, encrypted USB drive, timestamped video clips from my own security cameras showing her trespassing, audio snippets from my doorbell camera, where she'd muttered threats about escalating fines if I didn't comply with her increasingly bizarre demands regarding window tints, even crystal-clear footage of her kneeling on my lawn with that damned ruler, muttering about non-regulation fertilizer application. It felt petty when I saved it, like I was stooping to her level, but now it felt like crucial evidence. I walked back out and handed the drive to Agent Reyes. "There's footage of her on my property without permission multiple times, audio logs of interactions, photos she took from invasive angles, including one of her actually measuring my lawn." An agent nearby let out a low whistle. Reyes plugged the drive into a ruggedized laptop, her expression unchanging as she reviewed the files. You could almost see the digital nails being hammered into Karen's coffin. Her carefully crafted image of a concerned community leader was disintegrating pixel by pixel, replaced by the reality of a petty tyrant with boundary issues. Then, adding another layer of surreal drama to the unfolding scene, old Mr. Franklin from down the street shuffled over. He was a quiet widower, mostly kept to himself, but he had served on the HOA board years ago before quitting in disgust, though he never said why. He was holding something small and metallic in his wrinkled hand. "Excuse me, agent," he said, his voice raspy but clear, addressing Reyes. I found this last year. Dropped near the clubhouse right after she stormed out of a particularly nasty board meeting. Never knew what to do with it." He held out a small, unmarked USB flash drive. Reyes took it cautiously, examining it before inserting it into the laptop. The air crackled with anticipation. What now? What else could there possibly be? The agent operating the laptop navigated the drive's contents. Documents, emails, spreadsheets, lots of them. His eyes widened slightly. "Agent Reyes," he said, turning the screen so she could see. "You need to look at this." The drive contained meticulous records, not of official HOA business, but of something else entirely. It detailed a private, off-the-books HOA fund. Karen had been inventing nuisance fees, aesthetic infractions, community harmony disruptions, unapproved foliage density, collecting cash payments or directing online transfers to a personal account she deceptively labeled Community Aesthetic Improvement Fund. There were copies of emails where she boasted about her cleverness, spreadsheets tracking who paid and who argued, and even scanned receipts. Receipts for what? A high-end home wellness spa kit, a brand new, top-of-the-line $900 outdoor grill she'd recently shown off at a neighborhood barbecue, claiming Dave got it for her birthday, luxury yoga mats, even flight confirmations for a wellness retreat in Arizona. The agents looked stunned. I heard Agent Monroe mutter under his breath, "Well, hell, that escalated quickly." Karen saw the screen. She saw the spreadsheet with her personal account number. She let out a strangled cry and actually lunged towards the table, trying to snatch the flash drive back. "That's confidential. That's private community business. You have no right." Two agents instantly blocked her path. But before they could restrain her further, Dave, her husband, finally spoke again. He hadn't moved from his chair, just sat there looking defeated. Now he looked up, his voice filled with a weary resignation that cut through Karen's panic. "Karen," he said, his voice cracking, "stop, just stop." The silence that followed was profound. It was the sound of 20 years of passive acceptance shattering in an instant. It was the sound of the last nail being driven home. Karen deflated, all the fight seeming to drain out of her, leaving behind a bewildered, crumbling facade. With the financial fraud laid bare, the agent's focus sharpened. This wasn't just about a cut cable anymore. This was a pattern. They began conferring quietly, their movements becoming even more methodical. An order was given to secure Karen's phone, her HOA-issued laptop, and to request immediate access to her personal computer back inside her house. She offered only a soft, whimpering protest, finally seeming to grasp that this was no longer her little kingdom where she made the rules. This felt more like a war tribunal, and she just accidentally confessed to treason while trying to defend a parking violation. But the worst was yet to come. As they began processing the flash drive and the evidence I'd provided, Agent Reyes was handed a printed summary from a preliminary scan of Karen's HOA laptop, seized just moments before. She scanned the page, her brow furrowing. She looked up, first at Karen, then at me, her expression hardening into something beyond professional duty. It looked like concern, real concern. "You need to see this," she said, handing me the printout. I stared at it, confused at first. It was a list of file names, audio recordings, video clips. Then I read the labels: Tim Lawn Argument 0815 WAV, Nancy Fence Complaint Recording MP4, Board Meeting Strategy Session Hidden Mic OC. My stomach lurched. "Are you saying she recorded people?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The implications were chilling. Reyes gave a tight, grim nod. "More than that. She has extensive surveillance files, audio, video, multiple addresses tagged. Some contain metadata suggesting recordings go back at least 2 years. She took a deep breath. "We found evidence of hidden microphones potentially placed in community mailboxes, likely retrieved quickly. Motion-activated cameras hidden in decorative lawn ornaments pointed at neighbors' backyards. And logs indicating a wireless microphone was active during numerous closed-door HOA board meetings." I felt sick. This went far beyond petty HOA disputes or even embezzlement. This was systematic, predatory spying on her own neighbors, her own board members. "That's insane," I stammered. Agent Monroe, overhearing, grunted. "No, that's felony wiretapping, multiple counts." He handed over another report, this one detailing the initial findings from her laptop's network activity. "Looks like she had a digital trail leading from her devices to encrypted cloud storage accounts, registered under fake names. She wasn't just recording, she was archiving." Files were meticulously labeled, often accompanied by Karen's personal notes suggesting how the information could be used, leverage points, embarrassing snippets, arguments taken out of context. Notes like, use Sarah's comment about finances to ensure vote compliance, or play Bob's angry rant at next meeting if he questions budget. She was using illegally obtained recordings to intimidate, shame, and manipulate people into silence or compliance. The investigation kicked into high gear. One team, equipped with sophisticated scanners, began a sweep of Karen's house while she sat numbly on her front steps, watching her carefully curated world get condemned brick by brick. The scanners beeped intermittently, methodically. Inside her home office, they found 2 hidden microphones taped behind bookshelves. A tiny camera lens peered out from behind a fake air vent cover. Another minuscule listening device was discovered stuck beneath her kitchen table, right where the HOA board usually gathered for their informal chats. She'd been bugging her own allies, recording their candid conversations, likely searching for dissent or information she could twist to her advantage. But the true bombshell, the discovery that shifted the entire investigation from a serious local matter to a potential national security incident, came when a tech specialist cracked the encryption on one of her cloud storage folders. This one was labeled simply, VIP Watch. Inside wasn't gossip about lawn care or complaints about loud music. It was a collection of data Karen should never, ever have had access to. Screenshots of personal documents, passports, driver's licenses belonging to a resident down the street who, I suddenly remembered, worked as a mid-level diplomat. Scraped email headers showing correspondence with gov and domains. And most disturbingly, a fragmented audio recording, poor quality, but definitely capturing a conversation mentioning specific dates and locations related to what sounded like classified diplomatic travel itineraries. My blood ran cold. Karen, in her obsessive quest for neighborhood dominance and fueled by paranoia, hadn't just been spying on petty squabbles. She had somehow stumbled onto, or perhaps specifically targeted, information far above her non-existent clearance level. And she'd been hoarding it, treating classified details like juicy tidbits for her own private gossip column. I looked at Ray's. Her face was pale. She was already on a secure satellite phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. Notify counterintelligence immediately. We may have an active diplomatic security breach originating from civilian interference. Within minutes, the atmosphere, already tense, became electric. The remaining neighbors were gently but firmly pushed back further. Additional personnel arrived in an unmarked white van, specialists carrying equipment I didn't even recognize. The focus shifted entirely. What started as a crazy neighbor cutting a cable had spiraled into embezzlement, then illegal wiretapping, and now possible espionage, however accidental. The decryption specialist kept working. He accessed another encrypted folder, this one labeled HOA board only. He stared at his screen, then swore softly. She was copying neighborhood Wi-Fi signals, he muttered, disbelief in his voice. Routing traffic through her own system somehow, filtering for keywords. What kind of keywords? I asked, dread coiling in my stomach. He scrolled through a list. Standard stuff at first, complaint, violation, HOA, but then it gets specific, contractor, clearance, satellite, surveillance, secure comms, Pentagon. He looked up at me, his eyes grim. Looks like she was running broad, passive eavesdropping across unsecured or poorly secured networks within range, logging anything she deemed suspicious or potentially exploitable. And then it clicked. The puzzle pieces slammed together in my head with sickening clarity. Karen had noticed something odd about my setup months ago. Maybe it was the occasional late-night deliveries, the specialized antennas I sometimes tested, or just the fact that I kept to myself and worked from a reinforced shed. She didn't know what I did, but her paranoid mind, already primed for suspicion, flagged me as anomalous. She couldn't get direct access to my secure systems or the shed itself. My firewalls and physical security were too robust. So she started snooping the only way she could, broadly, digitally, casting a wide net hoping to catch something. Anything. Her obsession with controlling the neighborhood had twisted into full-blown, undirected espionage. And somehow, in her warped view, I had become the neighborhood's biggest threat, her white whale. I thought she was just an aesthetic-obsessed lunatic who hated cables. Turns out, she thought she was uncovering some kind of clandestine operation, and her cable cutting was just step one. The irony was suffocating. Just when I thought the situation couldn't possibly get any weirder, the young agent meticulously combing through Karen's financial records flagged something else. Not large sums, but a series of small, regular PayPal payments made over the past 18 months. The recipient, a company name that sounded vaguely official but utterly generic, Clear Zone Property Security Solutions. "Anyone heard of them?" Monroe asked, scanning the faces of his team. Blank stares all around. A quick search through official business registries and security contractor databases came up empty. No record of this company existed, anywhere. But the payment details were odd. They were heavily encrypted on Karen's end, masked through multiple layers. The amounts were inconsistent, sometimes small, sometimes slightly larger, always sent on irregular dates. It didn't look like a standard subscription or service fee. It looked like payments for information, perhaps, or guidance. Monroe frowned, rubbing his chin. He muttered something under his breath about shell companies and local assets. He looked at me. "You ever heard of HOA boards, especially ones near sensitive locations, being approached by third-party security consultants offering pro bono advice or cheap services?" I shook my head, confused. "No, never. Why?" Then it hit me, a cold dread washing over me. "Wait," I said slowly, the pieces clicking into place in a new, terrifying way. What if Karen wasn't just paranoid? What if someone intentionally fed that paranoia? What if this Clear Zone wasn't just a fake company she paid, but someone was coaching her, guiding her on what to look for, what kind of security threats to monitor within the community? Agent Reyes, who had been listening intently while monitoring her secure comms, confirmed the chilling suspicion less than an hour later. The digital forensic team had traced the receiving PayPal account through several shell corporations to an entity flagged in a previous Department of Homeland Security bulletin. Clear Zone Property Security Solutions, or whatever their real name was suspected of being a front. A front operation specializing in recruiting unwitting local assets, busybodies, disgruntled individuals, people in minor positions of authority like HOA presidents, in strategically important neighborhoods. Neighborhoods with residents connected to government, military, or diplomatic work. Their suspected motive: low-level intelligence gathering, tracking patterns, identifying personnel, gathering atmospherics, all achieved by manipulating locals into doing the snooping for them, often under the guise of enhancing neighborhood safety or community watch. They likely provided Karen with cheap surveillance gear, advice on technical monitoring like the Wi-Fi sniffing, and positive reinforcement, making her feel important, validated, in control. In exchange, she became their eyes and ears on the ground, potentially passing along information she gathered, possibly without even fully understanding its significance. Karen wasn't just a nosy, embezzling, power-mad control freak anymore. She was now potentially identified as an unwitting, or perhaps willfully blind pawn in a low-grade intelligence operation run by shadowy players, a pawn who thought she was the queen. When the agents confronted her with this, the payments, the company name, the DHS flag, she didn't deny making the payments. She just stared at them, her eyes wide with genuine terror now. They contacted me online," she stammered, her voice cracking. "After I posted on a forum about neighborhood security concerns. They said they help communities like ours stay safe. They offered advice, strategies. They told me it was my duty as president to keep tabs on anything or anyone. Suspicious. I thought I was helping. I was protecting the community. It was the first time she sounded truly scared, not just indignant or cornered. Maybe she finally realized she was drowning in waters far deeper and colder than she'd ever imagined. Dave, still sitting silently, now looked visibly ill. He buried his face in his hands and muttered just loud enough to hear, "Karen, oh God, what the hell did you get us into?" The answer was clear, way too deep. With the convergence of tampering with federal infrastructure, widespread illegal surveillance, financial fraud, and now potential entanglement with a flagged intelligence-gathering operation, the decision was made swiftly. Karen wasn't just going to be questioned and released. Agent Reyes and Agent Monroe approached her formally. Reyes calmly, clearly listed the preliminary charges: willful destruction of federal communications infrastructure, multiple counts of felony wiretapping and illegal surveillance, embezzlement and misappropriation of community funds, and pending further investigation, potential charges related to conspiracy and unauthorized gathering and dissemination of sensitive information. Karen didn't scream. She didn't argue. She didn't try to run. It was like all the fight, all the bluster, all the righteous indignation had finally evaporated, leaving behind only a hollow shell. She just nodded numbly as they read her rights again, formally placed her under arrest, and gently guided her towards one of the black SUVs. The infamous clipboard lay forgotten on her lawn chair. Her pink tote bag sat beside it, looking absurdly cheerful amidst the flashing lights and grim faces. As the SUV door closed behind her, a wave of hushed chaos swept through the gathered neighbors. They had known Karen was difficult, maybe even shady, but wiretapping, Pentagon cables, shadowy intelligence fronts, this was beyond anything they could have imagined. The woman who fined Mrs. Gable last month for having lawn flamingos, unapproved decorative elements, had apparently been playing a real-life, albeit incompetent, spy game. The disconnect was staggering. By the time the sun had dipped below the rooftops, casting long, orange shadows across the suddenly very interesting suburban landscape, most of the federal teams were packing up. The immediate crisis was contained, the suspect was in custody, and the evidence was secured. Agent Monroe walked back towards my shed, his expression solemn. "Your relay is compromised beyond immediate repair," he stated flatly. "We're arranging for a priority replacement installation, higher grade, full cloak protocol this time, buried deeper, shielded against detection, zero visible footprint. Your system and property are being upgraded to a designated red zone status." He paused, then added dryly, "Karen's little mess inadvertently flagged this whole area for enhanced security oversight. Great. Just what every homeowner wants." He then handed me a thick, silver envelope embossed with a government seal. "This is a formal commendation for your handling of the initial breach, maintaining operational awareness under pressure, and providing critical evidence." I took the envelope. It felt heavy, surreal. One minute I'm dealing with HOA nonsense, the next I'm getting a commendation from a branch of the DoD because my neighbor went rogue with garden shears. I half expected Alan Funt to pop out from behind a bush. As the last of the black SUVs rolled silently away, taking Karen with them, a strange quiet settled over the cul-de-sac. But it wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, charged silence that follows a massive explosion. The immediate danger was gone, but the fallout was just beginning to rain down. And the lingering thought that chilled me most was how easily Karen, driven by her petty need for control and validation, had seemingly been manipulated. How many other Karens were out there, in positions of minor authority, being subtly guided by unseen hands, thinking they were just enforcing the rules, while actually serving someone else's agenda? The thought was deeply unsettling. By Monday morning, the circus had officially arrived. News vans, emblazoned with logos from every local station and even a couple of national ones, lined the entrance to our neighborhood like patient vultures. Reporters milled about at the edge of the police tape, which had replaced the initial federal perimeter. Microphones clutched like weapons, trying to make sense of the bizarre story leaking out. Was it espionage? Was it just the world's craziest HOA dispute? The headlines were already wild. Suburban spymaster, HOA president arrested after cutting Pentagon cable. Or from petunias to prison, neighborhood watchdog accused of federal crimes. The truth, somehow, was even stranger than the speculation. I tried to lay low, keeping curtains drawn and ignoring the doorbell, which rang incessantly. But someone leaked my name from public property records, and soon I had reporters shouting questions over my back fence and shoving cameras towards my windows. I eventually gave a single, brief statement through my cracked front door. All I ever wanted was a quiet place to work and decent, uninterrupted internet service. Obviously, that became complicated. I have no further comment. Then I retreated back inside, locked the deadbolt, and watched the rest of the neighborhood deal with the media storm. There was a certain grim satisfaction, I admit, in observing the implosion of Karen's reign from the safety of my home office, sipping coffee from a novelty mug I'd bought myself that read, "World's Okayest Contractor." The legal wheels turned surprisingly fast. The charge of tampering with federal communications infrastructure, while serious, turned out to be just the opening act. The prosecutors piled on the charges related to the illegal surveillance, dozens of counts, one for each verifiable instance of recording or Wi-Fi snooping. Then came the financial crimes, embezzlement, fraud, forgery, as more evidence emerged from the HOA's chaotic books. And hanging over it all was the ominous cloud of the Clear Zone connection and the VIP Watch folder, which brought in federal prosecutors dealing with national security implications. Karen's arraignment was streamed online. I watched, morbidly fascinated. She looked diminished. Her usually immaculate hair was flat, her power suit replaced by standard-issue county jail attire. Her face was pale and puffy, and the public defender assigned to her looked utterly overwhelmed, like a man who'd expected a shoplifting case and instead got handed a Tom Clancy plot. Karen tried to maintain a semblance of composure, repeating her defense that she was just trying to protect her community, that she'd been misled. The judge, a stern-faced woman who clearly wasn't buying it, cut her off mid-sentence. Bail was denied. The prosecutor cited her access to illegally obtained funds, her demonstrated history of manipulation, and crucially, the potential foreign intelligence compromise aspect as making her a significant flight risk. A collective gasp went through the virtual courtroom audience. Back in the neighborhood, the HOA effectively ceased to exist overnight. 4 of the 5 remaining board members resigned immediately via email, wanting nothing more to do with the sinking ship Karen had captained. The 5th member, poor Frank, a quiet accountant who, by his own admission, only joined the board 3 years ago for the free pizza at meetings, found himself the acting president by default. The look on his face during the hastily called emergency community meeting, held in his driveway, was one of pure, unadulterated terror. He looked like someone had just handed him the keys to a ticking bomb. That meeting was memorable. Half the neighborhood showed up, buzzing with the latest news and rumors. When Frank nervously asked if anyone wanted to volunteer to take over the HOA leadership, the silence was deafening. For the first time in years, nobody wanted to be in charge. But the highlight wasn't the mass resignation. It was when, halfway through Frank explaining he had no idea where the official HOA records even were, a uniformed federal courier walked calmly up the driveway and handed me another padded envelope. Inside was a more formal letter of thanks from a higher-up at the DoD, a surprisingly tasteful commemorative challenge coin, and a small, laminated certificate I now keep ironically displayed on my office wall. Tucked in the back was a small, handwritten note on plain cardstock. "We've assigned additional quiet surveillance resources to your block as a precaution, both technical and human. You'll be in good hands. Stay vigilant." I wasn't sure whether to feel reassured or deeply creeped out. Probably both. The court proceedings dragged on for months, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Dave testified against Karen, his quiet voice describing her descent into paranoia and obsession, The late nights spent listening to recordings, the detailed threat journals she kept, the maps marking neighbors' routines. She stopped sleeping, he admitted sadly on the stand. She kept saying she had to stay ahead of everyone, that she knew things nobody else did. She really believed she was saving us all. It painted a picture not just of criminality, but of profound delusion. Then, another former HOA treasurer emerged, providing damning evidence that Karen had forged board member signatures on checks and contracts for years, effectively giving herself unilateral control over finances and decisions. The judge eventually declared Karen's entire multi-year tenure as HOA president a textbook case of unchecked authority spiraling into systemic abuse, manipulation, and criminal enterprise. Life in the neighborhood slowly, cautiously began to find a new rhythm. Without Karen's oppressive oversight, things relaxed. The HOA officially dissolved after Frank formally resigned by placing the clubhouse keys and a note reading, "Good luck, everyone, I'm out." In the old HOA mailbox, nobody argued. The clubhouse itself, once Karen's throne room, was spontaneously repurposed. Someone donated old couches. The retired Marine on the corner brought over his industrial-sized grill, and it became a genuine community co-op space, hosting impromptu Saturday barbecues. The first gathering saw the ceremonial burning of the old HOA meeting table in a fire pit, which felt cathartic. As promised, contractors arrived and upgraded my system. New, deeply buried fiber lines, enhanced shielding, a reinforced door with a biometric lock on the shed, and yes, even a small, silent drone dock disguised as an elaborate birdhouse mounted discreetly on the roof. "Is that really necessary?" I asked one of the techs. He just grinned. "After what happened here, consider yourself a flagship example of why we need robust civilian nodes, and maybe a little deterrent." Then came Karen's letter, forwarded from the county jail. 3 pages, handwritten in looping, erratic script. It was a bizarre mix, parts apology, "I never meant for things to go this far," parts conspiracy theory, "They set me up, the ones who promised me control," parts desperate plea, "Can you tell them I'm not a bad person? I was just lonely and wanted to matter." It was undeniably sad, a portrait of a personality imploding under the weight of its own obsessions. But responding felt like stepping back into the crazy. I quietly turned the letter over to the federal agents handling her case. They scanned it, thanked me, and that was the last I heard directly. The final news came via a small article buried deep in a legal news aggregator site months later. Karen had pleaded guilty to a reduced set of charges in exchange for cooperation regarding the Clear Zone investigation. She was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison, with possible parole after 5. The judge's closing remarks were damning. While the court acknowledges potential manipulation by external actors, the defendant's own choices demonstrated a profound abuse of trust and a pattern of behavior that posed a danger to her community, both socially and, ultimately, materially. Unchecked control in the hands of the self-righteous, the judge concluded, is often more insidious than outright chaos. No mention of remorse was reported. Walking through the neighborhood now feels lighter. The air is clearer, people wave. Kids leave bikes on lawns without fear of citations. Weeds bravely pop up in sidewalk cracks and nobody writes furious emails. Howard, the guy Karen tried to evict over his beloved but unregulated tomato garden, used his share of the redistributed HOA funds. The court liquidated Karen's secret accounts, returning nearly $160,000 to the residents she'd fleeced to build a beautiful greenhouse. Brenda from Lot 6 sent everyone postcards from her long-dreamed-of trip to Aruba. I donated half my share to the new co-op fund and used the rest to install a state-of-the-art backup satellite dish with encrypted fail-safes, just in case. Poetic justice, I figured. Karen's house, abandoned after Dave filed for separation and moved somewhere remote like Idaho, eventually went up for auction. The winning bid came from a retired Special Forces master sergeant looking for peace and quiet. He held a welcoming barbecue his first weekend, surveyed the crowd with a twinkle in his eye, and joked, Just so we're clear, anybody tries measuring my grass, they better have top-tier health insurance. We all laughed, maybe a little too loudly. Sometimes I still catch myself glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see Corinne lurking behind a hedge, clipboard at the ready. The shadow of her reign hasn't vanished completely, but it's fatting. The other day, I saw two teenagers playing catch near the old clubhouse. One threw the ball wild, and it smacked into a forgotten metal sign leaning against the wall, a relic from Corinne's era that read, "Community Conduct and Aesthetics Committee." The sign fell forward with a satisfying clang onto the grass. The kids froze, bracing for a scolding that never came. I just smiled and gave them a thumbs up. They grinned back and kept playing. That's the neighborhood now. Imperfect, maybe a little messy around the edges, but real. Free. All because one woman thought a vital piece of national infrastructure was an ugly cable, and decided with absolute confidence in her own authority to simply cut it. Turns out, it wasn't just a wire. It was the thread that unraveled an entire tapestry of lies, paranoia, and abuse, and somehow, accidentally, led us all back to something resembling peace. So yeah, that actually happened. Thanks for sticking with me through that absolute roller coaster of a story. It's proof that sometimes the craziest, most unbelievable things can be happening right under your nose, even in the quietest-looking suburbs. One minute you're worried about HOA violations. The next minute you're dealing with federal agents and potential espionage because someone really hated the look of a cable. You just can't make this stuff up. If you found this story as insane as I lived it, please hit that thumbs up button. It lets me know you appreciate these kinds of unbelievable true tales. And if you want to hear more about the bizarre situations life can throw at you, definitely consider subscribing to the channel and ringing that notification bell so you don't miss out. Now I have to ask, what's the absolute craziest thing you've ever seen a neighbor or someone in a position of minor authority do? Let me know your stories down in the comments. After what I went through, I have a feeling mine might not be the only wild one out there. Thanks again for watching. Stay vigilant out there, seriously, and I'll catch you in the next one.